Once upon a time, there was a game where you played the role of a supernatural creature that summons monsters and creatures and minions and moves them around the board to destroy your opponent. And you try to do that before the opponent destroys you and wins the game, or before you fall asleep. And the falling asleep, victory-losing condition, in my experience, was pretty relevant because this is a game that I really never warmed up to. And you know that I'm talking about Summoner Wars, which is a game that has a great following, a lot of people love it. Somehow, it never clicked with me. It was not deep enough to be all that exciting, to be worth the effort. It really seemed just chess or checkers with some fantasy things here and there, and not light enough at the same time to just be a quick light filler. It fell somewhere in between without exciting me very much. So you can imagine that I was a little skeptical when I heard of a game called Mage Wars that came out afterwards. That was about maneuvering your mage on a board made of squares, summoning creatures to send creatures against your opponent to destroy your opponent. So that wasn't too promising for me, but then I looked into it. The presentation was awesome, the art was very attractive, the game seemed to offer more options, to be more tactically interesting than Summoner Wars, so I decided to give a try to Mage Wars. And today I'm going to tell you about Mage Wars. That really, after I started looking into it, seemed like Summoner Wars after it went to grad school and got a PhD. Is Mage Wars Summoner Wars with a PhD? Well, I'll tell you that, or I'll answer that question in the conclusion of my video. Now let's talk about mechanics and gameplay. The game is played on a board representing the arena, which is a 4x3 square space, and each character is represented by a card that indicates the position of the character on the board. The dueling mages enter the board from opposing corners of the board. Each mage also have 2 cylinders that are placed on the character card. One indicates whether the character has acted or not in a turn. Before the character acts, the cylinder is face up like this. After the character has taken his or her action, you flip the character face down. Each mage also has a cylinder such as this one that indicates whether or not the character has taken his or her quick cast action. Each turn the mages can use an extra quick spell. After you use yours in a turn, after you use that ability, you flip that face down. Each character also has a board like this, and the board is used to keep track of things such as channeling, that indicates the amount of mana that you recover each turn, mana supply, your present level of mana, to cast spells you spend mana, then you regenerate through challenge to channeling. There are also other game effects that may drain mana, give extra mana, and then life supply, damage. You have a cube that you use to indicate your maximum level of strength, life, call it whatever you want, and another cube that is moved down when you take damage and then back up when you heal to indicate your present state of health. When one of the 2 mages goes down to 0 points of life, the mage dies and the game is over, with a victory, of course, of the opposing side. Each character has a book of spells. This is a very cool feature, and look, you can see me reflected in the cover. This is like magic, by which I'm talking about real magic, not the game. Well, anyhow, spell books. This is simply a tool that allows you to organize the spell cards that you will use during the game. Each turn starts with a phase in which the players select the 2 spells. That means 2 of these cards from their books. They take the cards out of the book and they play them face down in front of themselves. Not on the board, but this is just to show you more or less how it works. You select 2 spells at the beginning of the turn, and these are the only 2 spells that you can use that turn. So why the spell book? Well, it is not just because it is cool, I think. It really has a function in the game. That is, it keeps your cards organized, which to me is pretty important. I played other games in which you have to select cards from your deck every turn. Sometimes it takes a while to go through the deck and you miss the card that you're looking for. It can be pretty irritating. Well, here you do not have that problem. So I really like the spell books. I really think that they facilitate gameplay on top of being very thematic. Then the player with the initiative starts, and initiative shifts each turn. That means in one turn you'll be first, and the other player second, and next turn vice versa. When it is your turn, you get to activate one of your creatures. At the beginning of the game, you only have yourself on the board, but then you will summon creatures. Each creature will get an action cylinder and will get to have its own activation later. So suppose that now it is this Carter's turn to activate. She decides to spend an action to cast this spell that allows her to summon the Highland Unicorn for the cost of 13 points of mana. Pretty expensive. There's a lot of information here on the card, but don't be scared. One is the range, that means where you can cast that spell. Level of the spell, that is important when you are creating your own deck. This is the length of time it takes to cast the spell. This is a full action spell. That means that to cast that spell, to cast this spell, the mage cannot move that turn. The general idea is that you can move by 1 space and then the same turn take a quick action, or you can choose not to move at all and take a full action. So this is why, for example, you have some spells that have this symbol here, and these are quick spells. They can be cast even after the mage moves. Or you can use your second action to do something else as long as it is a fast action. For example, the priestess has a melee attack, which is a fast melee attack. So if she moves in the same area where an enemy is after moving, she can use her quick action to use her basic melee attack. So either move and take a quick action, and a quick action could be, for example, to move a second space. There are several options there. Or again, you can use a full action. Some melee attacks, for example, are particularly powerful and they are full actions. That means that you need to start your turn when you're attacking in the space with the enemy that you're attacking. Oh, here we have the Stone-Gazed Basilisk that can use the Paralysis Beam as a full action, so they cannot move that turn, range 0 to 2. And here you have the dice, the information that you need to resolve combat. So actually, yes, we can talk about that. Combat resolution. You pick up the number of dice indicated in the attack that you're using, 2 or 4, for example, for the Basilisk, that could use a melee as a quick action, and in that case we'll draw 4 dice. Suppose that is exactly what happens. So the Basilisk uses 4 dice to attack in melee, rolls the dice. Now, suppose that this is the result. As you can see, there are some numbers that are just there on a red background and some numbers that are within the sort of like symbol explosion. These dice indicate critical hits. Blanks are just blanks. Now, here you have the total amount of damage that has been inflicted on the opponent. However, there are things that will modify that. For example, the opponent may have armor. For each point of armor that the target has, you annul a regular hit that is a non-critical hit. If the priestess has a point of armor, then the Basilisk deals for 3 points of damage. However, if this is the result and the priestess still has 1 point of armor, only 1 non-critical hit is blocked by the armor, and then the total damage is 2 plus 1 plus 1 left would be 4. and you reduce the health of the target by that amount. When you're targeting a creature on the board, you have tokens to take to keep account of the number of hits that the character received. There are also special effects that may be generated by creatures when that symbol is represented. When the symbol is there, then you roll a d12 and you simply follow the instructions depending on the result. For example, if you attack with this attack and then on the effect die you roll 7 or plus, you have the cripple effect that is placed on the priestess. There are a lot of these tokens to keep track of stats. People may be burning, there may be a burn stats, maybe rotting, that's disgusting, daze, weak, stun, lot of possible effects that all work in different ways. I'm not going to mention everything. Another thing that you can do as an action, and this is something that your minions will do for you, is to stay on guard. You can spend an action to put a guard marker on one of your minions. Now, if an enemy is attacking in melee, the enemy has to attack the character that is on guard, that is defending you, and cannot attack the mage directly. So that's something that can be useful in many ways and in many cases. You have special type of enchantments that, as you can see, have two costs. One is a standard cost of 2 that you pay when you put down the card face down, as indicated by that symbol. That means the opponent doesn't know exactly what that card does, and you can attach it to yourself, to some of your characters, depending on the circumstances, on how you're using the spell. Then there is a second cost, as you can see, and the second cost is paid when you reveal the card. Sometimes the instructions and the situation will force you to reveal the card in a certain specific time, at a certain time. Some of the times that's not the case, and you can reveal the card whenever, and then you simply implement the effect. For example, when this card is revealed, from that moment on, the creature that the card is attached to gains armor +2. Mage bind, that means that there's an extra cost to pay if you're attaching that card to a mage rather than to one of the creatures on the board. And then there are tons of other possible spells, but I think the main ones really are these ones. You put creatures on the board. After a while, each player will have a little bit of an army moving around. You organize your army, you maneuver around your opponent, you maximize your effects, you try to figure out what the opponent is doing, you plan carefully for your next turn when you're selecting your spells, and you continue like this, attack after attack, defense after defense, spell after spell, until one of the two players is reduced to 0 points, to 0 life points, and at the point the other player is the winner. This is a super duper mega phenomenal game. I just love it. This is a game that is so thematic, so immersive, and yet so mechanically sound. It flows so well. You have a bazillion options each turn, but you need to restrain yourself to just the spells that you choose to cast, which of course comes with a lot of outguessing, bluffing, outsmarting, trying to figure out what the opponent is going to do, because the opponent may maneuver things in such a way that the two spells that you had prepared will not be that useful. Timing is very important. The fact that the initiative goes back and forth is key, because going first in a turn really can be important. You can move close to the opponent and deliver the final blow, launch that particular spell that will allow you to destroy that magic item that the opponent has been harassing you with for most of the game. Tactical options come together with, and by tactical options really I mean timing, positions on the board. Well, these options come together with all of the options that you have in the ways in which you generate your effects, you use your effects, and you choose your effects. Everything really comes together in a phenomenal almost virtual reality level of involvement experience. Great, 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 incredibly immersive game. Replay value, mind-blowing, because the combination of cards that you can choose before the game starts is just phenomenal. There is a little bit this fact, of course, that the meta game is something you have to take into account. You have to plan that in advance. Either your opponent chooses the cards at home before the game starts, or you do that when when you're setting up the game. That may take a while. And there is, like in every game where you have so much customization, of course, there is that the metagaming becomes predominant. A player that really has given a lot of thought to selection of spells may have a huge advantage before the game even starts. But in that regard, in that department, I didn't see Mage Wars being any worse or any better than most of the games of this time. I think it is exposed to the same level of danger that may happen that most of the games are. So that's something that happens with games that can be customized. You can also use list of spells that are recommended in the game, especially for beginners, and that should give a buffer there, that should give a little bit of an equalizing situation. But of course, to me, getting to choose your spells is such a great way of customizing your characters, creating a character that you really care about. And the 4 characters that are available in the game play in completely different ways from one another. You can even make the hard choice of choosing spells that really do not belong to your school of thought. That would be something that clearly would surprise the opponent, but then it costs you a lot of points. If you choose that, there are a lot of other stuff that you cannot choose. You consume a lot of resources in the creation of that deck. Everything is a tough choice from even before the beginning of the game. Then as the game begins, the tough choices continue. And of course, the interaction with the opponent will add more. The game is just incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding from beginning to end. I'll say one minor minus so that I don't sound like too much of a fanboy, which by the way I am. I'm a total fanboy of this game. The game, if the players choose particularly defensive combinations of actions, healing spells and things like that, the game may drag a little too long. If characters keep healing themselves and building up defenses, and they both do that, it may take a while before the tide really turns. In any case, that doesn't have to happen. It depends on how the players build their spell books. It takes 2 players to have that defensive philosophy for the game to last a little too long. In most cases, that was not my experience at all. The game lasted too little, not because it didn't last long, but just because I had so much fun that I wanted to see things happening all the time. I wanted to see new interactions, new creatures coming onto the board, new landscape pieces. You can modify the landscape on the board by conjuring up new things. Some of those things may spawn new creatures. There may be creatures that you customize. You do not always customize yourself. You even customize your creatures. You can give them spells. This is a world. It seems so abstract when you look at the board, just like sort of like this grid, and yet there is an entire world that really is magically summoned by the components, by the mechanics, by everything. This is a game that I love immensely. I cannot wait to play it more. I cannot wait to add new things, to play expansions, just because I'm curious about them. But in reality, I could just get so much playing out of what I found in this box here that, wow, that would already keep me entertained for a long time. I tried to figure out a way how can I summarize how much I enjoy this game, what it means to me. Well, first I'll go with a traditional thing, 2 big thumbs up from me, but in reality I think the thing that really captures everything is that after I played Mage Wars, now I am a believer.